Hello, everybody in the UK, and I'm here to talk to Queen McDonnell about his latest book, The Final Game, and the world of Bunny Mcgary and his Paul McClone series. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Queen. If you could tell us a bit about the plot of The Final Game, then please, to start us off.
Okay. Cool. Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Well, The Final Game is, God, it came out in March now. Let me just remind myself. Yes, basically, it's, I had a series called the Dublin Trilogy, which of course had 4 books in it because I never could count. And this is kind of one of the main characters, Bunny Mcgary, disappears, shall we say, after that, without spoiling anything. And this catches up with pretty much everybody else we met who set up a company called MCM Investigations. And the sort of thing that really sparks the whole book off is a character we met previously, a lady called Dorothy, who was a sort of old, she was an old sort of, frankly, a bit of a badass old lady who was quite the character, and she dies. But she has left a video will where she hates her family because they're terrible, terrible people. So she's left a video will where she basically forced them into a competition to compete for her money. Live on, kind of like a YouTube thing and stuff. It's sort of like a Japanese game show, if you like, except it's being done for all the money. And at the same time, she also leaves a second message for Paul and Bridget, who are the 2 main characters in the book, telling them that she believes that she has been murdered. So they have to compete in the game on her behalf, against 3 of her grandchildren, while at the same time trying to figure out who murdered her.
What was the inspiration for the game?
I think for the games part of stuff, I'm not really sure. It's one of those odd things where you can't, while I'm writing, I always have bits and pieces of the stuff, but that was kind of the last thing that came in. I wanted to do something sort of a bit silly with them when I went around various different ideas about treasure hunts around Dublin and all that sort of stuff. And I think then I've never been a fan of reality TV, to make it absolutely clear, but I thought it was quite fun to send it up in a little bit of a way, while also kind of adding to the plot. So because of that, it's just a good device where you get to come up with ridiculous ideas of games they have to play, where they have to do an assault course where there's literally, I think they have to do an assault course where they have to carry horse shit from one end to the other on a shovel. And it just became a fun way, because it works brilliantly with the principal, because basically Dorothy is trying to humiliate people who she thinks has never done a decent day's work in their life. So the whole idea is that it's, what would I do if I was trying to humiliate people who have really annoyed me? So it's a bit of a wish fulfillment thing where we can all come up with what would we like to do to people who have annoyed us over our life. And I think that was where the main inspiration came for the games part of it anyway.
Yeah, it's of the 2 I've read so far, they seem to subvert the genre, and there's a lot of comedy involved. If people don't know about your background, could you tell us why that might be, please?
Well, to be honest, to be honest, if you go back to childhood, there's a lot of psychological reasons why comedy's there. But the main use I've made of comedy is before I did this for a full-time living, which I've done for just over a year now. I was a writer for TV, and I was a stand-up comedian. So I did stand-up for, I'm going to say, 18 years, I think. I retired last year in June in Glasgow. And the joke was I retired in a heatwave in Glasgow. And the joke when I did my final ever gig was, if they ever get another one, I'll come back. But basically, so yeah, I retired from them. So I was a stand-up. People might know Sarah Milliken and Gary Delaney. I was 2 good friends of mine. I've been supporting them on tour for the last few years. I haven't really done clubs for quite some time. But yeah, I've always kind of done comedy stuff. And then a few years ago, I had an idea for a thriller. This is how I got into writing from this part of it. I had an idea for a thriller, and decided, I need to figure out how to write this properly. I ended up doing a master's in creative writing, which I didn't finish. But I was writing short stories while I was doing it. And I started writing one short story that I realized at a certain point was actually a novel, and it became my first novel. And the rest of my books have kind of sprung from that, but that was all accidentally. But comedy is a big part of my work, because it's not so much like I'm trying to write funny books. It's just, it's in my nature. If you've got a hammer, everything's a nail. If your brain works in a comedy way, I think the way you find ways through things is just to do it in a funny way. It's not like I'm even trying to do it. It's just what comes out, really.
Yeah. What was the inspiration for Bunny Mcgary's name? Because it's a bit of an unusual.
Do you know, it's funny you should ask that, because I actually thought at one point that there was a character in The Wire called Bunny. And then I went back and checked, and that wasn't true. So, honestly, Bunny, I have no idea. There is a kind of Irish thing where you will get particular odd names like that. And I guess that was where that came from. But hand on heart, I have no idea, if I'm entirely honest with you. Because names are hard anyway as a writer.
Yeah.
I mean, my poor wife reads every book I've ever written, and she goes through them. You've called 4 different characters the second name Danaher. It's just, I've got certain names that pop into my head and I keep using. So the advantage of calling somebody Bunny is at least it's distinctive. So I guess that's the best thing I can say for it.
When you were coming up with the minor characters, like one of the dogs, I believe that was influenced by a short story, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I did a short story because basically one of the things, like, I've never, people say they're a cinephile and all this sort of thing. So I do like cinema, but I've not seen all the films you're supposed to see. I've not done the reading you're supposed to, I've never read all the really cool lists. But one of the things I've always been obsessed about in film is films like K9 and Turner and Hooch, if you remember any of these classics. Still Tom Hanks' finest work. I don't care what anyone says. But basically, dogs, any film where they had a good cop, bad cop, and the bad cop was a dog, is pretty much guaranteed to be my top 10 all favorite films. And so I was sort of obsessed with that, probably because I wanted a dog at the time. And because of that, I wrote a short story where I put a dog in, and I wanted to make it like the ultimate maverick, where when you meet in the short story, when we meet Maggie the dog, she's about to be put down for an incident at a Garda barbecue where I think she went mad, and she was drugged. She was a sniffer dog that somebody drugged to get revenge. So she ends up being basically Mel Gibson's character from Lethal Weapon. That's the best way I can describe her. She ends up being that in canine form. And then she was in the short story, and people liked the dog in the short story so much that she just sort of ended up being in books as well and becoming a very strong character in that regard.
When developing the series, what made you decide to use nuns in there too? Because it's a bit of an unusual plot choice.
Yeah, I think if anyone's had my education, Irish people, but people around the world, my wife is actually from Kent, but she had nuns as teachers as well. Nuns are always quite scary for a start. I mean, it's hard to explain to people who've not really experienced them. I should add, by the way, full disclosure, I had an aunt, God rest her soul, who was a nun who was lovely, at least to me. But yeah, basically nuns are kind of, and I kind of hit on the idea that a rogue bunch of nuns who are basically kind of badass, and because they're shown as quite one-dimensional nuns in a lot of stuff, where they're just people who go around whacking people on the hands and being quite horrible. Whereas I maybe had more experience in nuns and stuff, and I thought, they're very like Derry Girls is one of example. I don't know if you've seen that sitcom, but the nun in that is brilliant. And she kind of more represents some of the nuns I've known throughout my life, where they are very funny, very sarcastic. They can be. So it's one of those things where it sort of started off that I needed a way for a character to have made it to Ireland. And I thought, well, she has to get out of America. And I thought, who was going to rescue her? And then it's well, nuns kind of did. And I ended up basically coming up with this group that I really like called the Sisters of the Saint. And the idea is they are basically been excommunicated. And because there is a thing in religion where you're supposed to, generate religious orders where they go in and do certain things, but they can't get in the way of politics, even though they kind of do. But I'd like the idea of them going in, breaking all the rules, not going around shooting people, but basically, not doing that, but basically using their position of people underestimating them and thinking they're just women in silly habits, and them going around and rescuing people from around the world and basically making the world a better place. They're essentially the A-team as nuns. That's the best way of describing them.
The idea of a jazz singer was a bit of a bit of a problem for Bunny to start with, but I think he seemed to enjoy it by the end. What made you decide on jazz singers for that?
I think it's something I generally like to do in my work is that I like to kind of look at, I wouldn't say I do it subconsciously, but it's just the way my mind works, where things in the genre, like I love James Ellroy and Elmore Leonard and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of American things. I was reading a lot of American crime writers, and jazz is always it's like the big thing in American crime, really, to a certain thing, is the detectives being fans of jazz and all that. So I think the reason it came out of it was I've been read a couple of books and I thought I just sort of end up taking these things and putting my spin on it. So she is a really good jazz singer, and I like the idea in it that Bunny knows nothing at all about jazz. And then he hears this woman sing and it just entrances him. Because the power, like I was in bands for a long time, and we sort of forget this. If anyone's ever seen the film that the Frames, Glenn Hansard, they made it into a musical. I can't remember, Once. That's what it was. If you ever see it, it's a wonderful thing. But the film's great. But the real energy of it is people being up close to somebody playing music brilliantly. And I think I'd seen that quite recently. And I knew a lot of musicians. My friends are all musicians in Ireland. So I wanted to bring in the shock of somebody really being affected by music, and that's how Bunny basically falls in love with this woman before he ever sees her face, which I guess appeals to some big soft Egypt romantic part of me as well.
Is that why PIs come to it? Because they do seem to be quite a stalwart of the genre, really, and you seem to like to cover both sides in your different series.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think just private investigators, I thought was an interesting thing, and in this day and age, they sort of have a very different feel to them. So I tried to create, use private investigators, but also I've done some research, and a lot of private investigators these days are insurance fraud and, frankly, catching people, shagging people they shouldn't be. That seems to be the two main areas in my limited research. So I kind of like the idea of people like wanting to be a PI and then discovering that, it's a bit like this, and then trying to find a way of, doing something more with it, because I think anyone who reads crime, I'm convinced we'd all like to be investigators, but the reality of what we'd end up doing if we were PIs, I think, would be pretty grim for most of us. So I like the idea of somebody who is a big crime fan becoming a crime investigator, which is what Bridget is throughout the books. Bridget Conroy, the main female lead, is she's basically written as a crime obsessive who reads all the books, and then it's her dealing with the reality of that situation. Yeah,
it's a pretty massive arc, nurse to PI, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where, like I said, I've written a series of books. I had no idea I was doing that when I started. Again, Bridget just being a nurse was just because I know a lot of nurses, and they're pretty kick-ass. I mean, even before we all started clapping them, I've got, again, a couple of aunts who are nurses. Being Irish, all you have is aunties who are nurses and nuns. And they're always very impressive people. They're always the most take-charge people. In a crisis, I would take a nun or a nurse over pretty much anybody else. So I thought this woman wanting to do something more and being a crime fan made sense. And I thought the way she goes about things is she has the kind of practicality that I associate with a lot of my friends and family that are nurses.
When you were doing the research for the Bunny series in the US, did that change much? Because of course, researching in a different country can be difficult sometimes.
Yeah, it was a big challenge, and I mean, what we can do these days as authors compared to what authors used to have to do, like now we can look up Google Maps. You can literally do a chase scene where you follow the entire chase through the streets of New York and just you can actually do it on Google Maps, which is extraordinary. You can find videos and stuff. But still, myself and my wife actually went over and we stayed in Brooklyn, and we went around Brooklyn a lot, and also bits of Manhattan. And what was great was I did the research, and then we went there, and we actually, in my book, Disaster Inc., we actually spent a day following a chase scene I'd already written, which was the finale of the book. We followed it around the actual streets, and then I came back and rewrote it. And it was just cool to kind of look at this place you'd been imagining in your head and seeing it for real, and then going, oh, that wouldn't work, or that would be better, or we could go in here and stuff like that. And that was really cool. And then when it comes to writing in America, I guess I mean, you hope to try and get the language right. I obviously have people to help out as well, which have been great. But also, I think the advantage that we all have is we all see quite a lot of American TV. I know I do. So I think in some way their speech patterns are maybe more familiar to us than possibly ours would be to them, and the other way around.
Yeah. Speaking of language, the audiobook was very distinctive because of the Irish accent. And of course, you've self-published that with help.
Yeah, well, we did all of it ourselves. Like all my books, I've actually got a book coming out in January, which is with Transworld, which is a different genre. But until that, there'll be 9 books that are all done by myself and my wife. And the audiobooks we spent, they're really tricky to do. We spent a lot of time getting auditions. And then there was a guy called Morgan C. Jones, who is really one of the top voiceover guys in Ireland, like really, really top notch. And we knew a friend of him through comedy. Because I'll be honest, we did a lot of auditions, and the problem we had was it's really hard to hit a funny line exactly right. And if you're an actor and stuff, if it's not your kind of thing, we just got auditions. You went, oh, you've not got that. And then Morgan did it and just nailed it because he's a former stand-up himself. So he just got the rhythm of the comedy, and he just, without trying to force it, he just got it naturally. And because of that, then we eventually managed to get him, and I did have a look at doing it myself for a while, just because, again, at least we thought, well, I'll get the rhythm. And I sort of went through the process of starting to record one. And I had a great teacher. I got a lot better at it than I was, because it started off dreadful. And I got to the point where I was not awful. I'd say that far. Yeah. I wouldn't say good. I wouldn't even say okay. I would say not awful. But even the great thing about doing that is, though, I understand the process of that probably better than almost any author, because I've actually tried to do it. So I can give Morgan notes now, and we sort of have a much better rhythm. And Morgan now is, I mean, I think it's fair to say, I would think the audiobook versions of the books, honestly, is probably, dare I say it, the best way to experience them. Because I think they really come to life with Morgan. He gives it a new dimension. He's a brilliant actor. And I don't mean to do this, but I keep giving him the worst things imaginable you can ask an author to do. A narrator to do. Like in my first book, there's an Indian doctor. Because I can remember that, because I literally woke up in the middle of the night when I was going to do it myself. And my wife was in bed with me. And I literally woke up and went, there's a freaking Indian doctor. Why is there? Can't do that accent. And then Morgan, bless him, had to do that. Did it really well. I've given him people with stutters. There's been a Tourette sufferer. I've given him a vast amount of different accents. I've given him, there's a lady called, actually there's 2 Dorothys in my book, which was a mistake on my part. But the other one is a sister in the Sisters of the Saint. And she is from Ghana. She is based on my mother-in-law. And poor old Morgan had to basically do an impression of my mother-in-law. And then my wife sent him notes explaining what he should be doing. All of which he has done excellently. He's been an absolute star.
Since you started recording the audiobooks and working with him closely, has it changed any of the character arcs at all?
I thought it was changed character arcs so much, but I mean, I think one of the big things it's done is, I must admit now, when I'm writing somebody, I kind of hear Morgan's voice in my head, if I'm entirely honest. It's sort of in my head now, so I don't know if it's changed any of the arcs, but it's definitely brought the characters to life in a different way for me, and which has been, again, great, because it's very hard in your own work to kind of see it from a different perspective, but listening to Morgan, I think, gives that perspective, which has been fantastic.
What would you say to anyone that was trying to self-publish? What would you say to avoid doing?
I mean, the big thing really is, which we have been, we are keen on, is you've got to make the highest quality product possible, I think, is the most important thing. I mean, I'm quite blessed. Some people in the group, and hello everyone, by the way, and I can see some notes coming in, as you've been as Harrogate and stuff, you will have met my missus. Everyone does. And she is a former editor herself from educational publishing and stuff. So and she also worked in marketing until a couple of weeks from now, when she's going to be working full time for us. So she was the perfect resource, effectively, where she knew about the production side and she knew about the marketing side. So we went in, and one of our biggest things was we had to get good editors. There's a guy called Scott Pack, who probably some writers would know, who's a fantastic editor, who used to be the head buyer for Waterstones in the UK. He was my editor from the first person we got was him, and he was just great from the get-go. He's done all my books, and he's just a fantastic editor. I think just if you are going to do it yourself, you have to do the strongest products you can. So get the best editors, get the best book covers you can. And then there are advantages and there's disadvantages. My first book came out August 2016, so it was nearly 4 years ago now. And the great thing with self-publishing is I didn't have to go to, if I did that through an ordinary publisher, I would have had one a year. So I would now be on book 3 of the Dublin trilogy. As it happens, because I didn't have those constraints on me, and I like writing, and I genuinely I do like to keep working. I don't really stop much. So next couple of weeks' time, my 8th book comes out, and then the 9th one comes out before Christmas. And the great advantage of that is if you are self-publishing, you do end up, you're able to create, your books a lot quicker. You're not restrained by that. But I guess the big thing with self-publishing is just get the best people you can and get the best advice you can.
Given those advantages, what was appealing about going to traditional publishing?
Well, really, because I've a traditional publishing deal, I said, that's coming out, and it's a very different genre. It's a book called The Stranger Times. It's a paranormal crime, I guess you'd call it, book based in Manchester, which is where I live, by the way. And honestly, with that, it was just I wanted to try it a different way. Transworld are fantastic publishers. So to be honest, they're Terry Pratchett's former publisher. He's my all-time favorite author. So that kind of got me right in the feels, as they say, as the kids say. If someone wants to appeal to your ego, that's exactly how they do it. So really, I wrote something very different. We just wanted to see what people thought of it, and we were very lucky where German publishers, bizarrely, there's this weird thing, frankly, to be completely honest. There's an odd thing in British publishing, which I've experienced twice now, where they get very nervous about things that are funny. They honestly don't really know what to do with them. So a lot of the time when people try and suggest funny book, they kind of go, oh, it's a bit, like I was literally told from when I initially went looking for an agent and all that stuff, when I first started my very first book, they were like, you'd have to hide the funny away and sort of present it like an ordinary crime book. And then, if people sort of enjoyed it once they'd read it, that was okay, but you can't really tell them beforehand. And I was like, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's just, it just seems like, if you're going to do something, do it properly. And the weird thing is, by the way, we've been very lucky, but we found people who were mad keen to find funny crime books. And I keep getting emails all the time asking people to recommendations for more funny crime books, because it's a massive genre and there's different flavors. Don't get me wrong, I read all the big crime writers. I'm a massive fan of the genre, but the idea that humor wouldn't fit into some of it is not. It does. Yeah. And I think it adds something different that people will enjoy. It's a nice bit of what they'd call counter programming in TV terms, where it gives you something a bit different. So yeah, but because of that, we got Transworld, and they were just really keen. And I just wanted to, I thought it was interesting as an author, frankly, to try working with other people. And Jinx, touch wood, as I say, it's still early. They've been wonderful people to work with. And it's just been a nice thing to do something a bit different. But my bunny books and stuff like that will all still remain independently published by myself, my wife, and our company. That's not going to change. But we'd like doing it both sides. It just makes sense to have the two different things, just to bit of variety.
So does that mean that you'll be having one book with them, and then you'll be still doing the bunny ones yourself?
Yeah, basically there's going to be, I've signed a 3-book deal with them and the Germans and all the other publishers. So there'll be 3 books, one a year provisionally. I think that's the idea. Seeing how things go, obviously, but one a year, and then I'll be doing my own books around them. And the Stranger Times is written under C.K. McDonnell, mainly because they were like, could we not use Caimh? Because to be honest, I was kind of hoping they wouldn't want to use Caimh for very boring Amazon reasons, where the two things will get confused. And we thought we'd have to go into the meeting and sort of try and nudge them towards not using Caimh. One of the first things they said was, I'm really sorry, but would you mind if we didn't use your Irish name, because nobody can pronounce it? And I was like, yeah, that worked out really well. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. So yes, I'm now Caimh and CK. That's my 2.
when developing the Caimh brand, what made you go for the covers? You think because they are uniquely you.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of, like I said, we look. I always said I looked into it, and then somebody asked me, "How did you get the first cover?" I said, "Well, we did a big competition. We had a lot of, we paid quite a lot of people to get involved and try and get ideas." It's like, well, you didn't really get them by luck. It was, yeah, we did spend a lot of time. I think when we got the first cover and we had a few good ones, when we hit on the first cover, we thought, because there's not really many funny crime books, if you like. If you go looking for them, there isn't really a look that the covers have. Like Christopher Brookmyre's covers back when he was probably doing more funny stuff, had a distinctive and lovely look to them. And then Colin Bateman has a certain look and stuff, but there isn't really a genre thing. So we kind of went, well, I guess the other side of that is it gives us a bit of freedom. And we sort of went looking for something that looked a bit retro, that kind of gave a hint to the genre, but really didn't give that much of it. And once people liked the first cover so much, it just sort of made sense. And we keep trying to move away from it, to be honest. We keep going, right, we're going to do something slightly different this time. And then we end up kind of coming back to something that looks quite consistent. And it just became a look that people associated with us. And it was, again, my wife had the common sense to go, you've got a brand now, so we should stick to that because she knows about these things. So, and it just, jinx touch wood, it seems to work, and we do like it.
What was unique about what made you go for the current cover? Because I know it's gaming, but it's a lot more less. There's less on this cover than there's on the others.
Yeah, it was just one of these things where we had a few different ideas, and I guess it just ended up being the simple thing. And I've always, to be honest, I've kind of tried before to make covers really simple, and then we've looked at them and gone, oh, it's a bit boring. And then this was one that we looked at and went, actually, that kind of works. So I guess it's just, we get that with our books, there's the Mcgary stateside, there's now 2 of them, and there'll be a third one in October. And they have a more busy feel with its 3 images. And that was basically, we wanted something that looked different to the other books, but at the same time had the same overall feel. Whereas this looks more like the Dublin trilogy books, just because it's set in Dublin and it sort of made sense. And covers are weird where you can spend a long time looking at stuff and you have all these ideas and then frankly none of them work, and you kind of end up going and luckily this just hit and it just seemed to work.
What is it about Dublin that makes it a unique place to write in?
I mean, I don't know, it's hard to say because I wasn't technically born there. I was technically born in Limerick, which is down south, but I was there for 2 whole weeks, so I don't really consider myself from Limerick. And they don't consider me from there either, to be fair. I think with Dublin, like a lot of cities, it's the rhythm of the speech is a large part of it, where there's a certain way of talking, and it's just in my head. I went to school in a place called Cabra, which is a working class Dublin area, and just there's a great rhythm to the speech. And I think Irish speech, if you look at Irish stand-ups and stuff, there's something about the way we talk, and it's developed in Ireland where there is, it just lends itself to storytelling and stuff like that. Like I've got uncles who are just incredible storytellers, and it's just something about the way I think it's one of those things where it's like a weird genetic thing where storytelling became valued in Ireland because some people were good at it. Like back in the days when we were all monkeys or something, it was like there was a monkey that was really good at telling a story in Ireland. I know this isn't how it works, but let's pretend it is. There was a monkey that told a story in Ireland. The other monkeys really enjoyed it. The young monkeys looked at that way. See that monkey there? He got a load of bananas telling that story really well. This is not going to be a good YouTube clip of any scientist in. But my point is, basically, Irish monkeys like telling stories in a certain way, and we developed into this weird super race of monkey storytellers. Next question, please. That went down a weird rabbit hole. Anyway.
Yeah. I've got to ask who your favourite monkey is now.
Now you're talking, mate. I think I've got let's see this. He's quite good. People say I have got a tragic selection of monkeys because I used to get them for presents of people. I've actually got a ventriloquist monkey doll. This is years ago. when I was first moved to London. I may have been drunk. That's not really. I hate fulfilling the stereotype, but I may have been drunk. And I remember waking up one morning and going, "What did I do when I came in last night? What did I buy?" Like I found this weird thing. I'm like, "Why have I spent 300 quid?" And I've got a ventriloquist monkey doll called Bernard that I still take out occasionally. That can't do ventriloquism, but Bernard's claim to fame, by the way. If anyone's seen Nina Conti, who's the brilliant, incredible ventriloquist who does the thing with a little monkey, she's amazing. Tom Conti's daughter as well. If anyone didn't know that, the actor. But she, I kind of know her from back in the stand-up days, and she was in my house once, and she actually did ventriloquism with the monkey, and it's amazing. This is what I love about ventriloquism, is that I know it's my monkey. I know it's just an animate monkey. Within 2 minutes, Nina had me just looking at the monkey like, wow, there's a live monkey. In my head, that monkey was as real as your eye, my friend. It's an amazing thing. So yeah, I'm a little bit obsessed with monkeys. But who's my favourite? I mean, it's a tough question. I think Clyde. I've actually got an orangutan in my new book coming out. It's a seamless link. Welcome to Nowhere, coming out in a couple of weeks, and there's an orangutan who we actually are putting on the cover, and I think he is my homage to Clyde from the Clint Eastwood films. So yeah, I'm going to go for of primates. He is my favorite, shall we say?
Oh, that was pretty cool. I'm going to go to audience questions if you can see them on the side there.
Oh yeah, cool. Hello everybody. Thank you very much for asking questions. That's cool. Would you like me to read these out?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Cool. When you were performing comedy, I saw you take the roof off at Nottingham, just to tonic. That seems unlikely. To the point where the compere Johnny Vegas got you to do an encore. Ah, yeah, that night. That was a night. How does the buzz compare to that one? Get crafting. How does that buzz compare to the one you get from crafting great books? Well, first off, thank you very much. That was very kind of you. That was actually, on that story, that was the first and, to be fair, only time I met Johnny Vegas, who is renowned as a lovely man, and I can say he genuinely, honestly is. He's a big rugby league fan, as people know about him. I'm a big rugby union guy, as you probably don't know about me, but I know the area his son plays in London. He plays rugby union, so I tell him a lot about coaches I know and stuff. So that was Johnny Vegas. He was emceeing the night. And the thing is with Johnny Vegas is he is Johnny Vegas. But I mean that is he is A, phenomenally funny, B, doesn't understand time. So he'll literally wander on and just start. He's not even doing material. He's just riffing on stuff. And you can't tell Johnny to do 5 minutes because Johnny's Johnny Vegas. You got to let Johnny Vegas be Johnny Vegas. So what that meant was the night was getting later. So I ended up being the headline act. But the promoter, a guy called Daryl Martin, came up and said, just go and do a tight 7. You're like, I'm supposed to do 25. 7. I was like, okay, well, this seems a bit odd. I've been sitting around all night. All right, I'll go up and do 7 minutes. And Johnny, bless him, I did 7 minutes, which went all right, thankfully. And I came off, and Johnny was like, whatever. I was like, well, we're out of time. He went, oh, no. And he went, no, bring him back on. And Johnny just insisted that I went on and did more. But those are weird gigs because Johnny Vegas is a big hero of mine. It's quite a cool thing with comedy is I got to meet a lot of my heroes. But the thing with that gig is you're not closing that gig. You're not the headliner of that gig. You're the bloke who's on when Johnny Vegas is getting a point in. You're basically just there to fill in while Johnny gets a couple of drinks and then comes back out again. So yeah, it was an amazing time. But meeting someone like that. So yeah, and how the books compare to that? I mean, it's not quite as the highs and lows aren't the same. I mean, somebody can write the most vicious 1-star review they like. It's not going to be the same as getting booed off in Chester was. Let me tell you that. It's like genuinely, like if you want to, we're all sensitive souls in some level. But the great thing with stand-up is you kind of go, well, I've had worse. What's the worst that can happen? Nobody's going to find out where I live and come around and try and punch me. I mean, like I remember having a gig in Chester, and there was a bunch of squaddies in. And I'm not slagging off all squaddies by any means. I actually know a couple of guys in the British Army, nice lads. But these guys weren't. And I was on stage, and they were heckling and just being arse. They were trying to ruin the whole night, and they did. And I always remember I got off stage, and this bloke from the crowd went, "Oh mate, well done for getting through that." I said, "I want to buy you a drink," and he brought me up to the bar. And then one of the squaddies were all behind me, and one of them tapped me on the shoulder. And he went, I want you to know you were, I'm not sure I can swear, so he put in the word you'd expect. You were completely, and I went, Be honest, mate. You and all your mates can get the out of here. I'm not impressed with any of you. And I turned back around to the bar, and the guy had me a point and went, I can't believe you just said that. And I remember I went, to be honest, mate, I'm pretty surprised myself because I was like, I'm gonna die. So my point is, stand up. You probably don't get the highs, but you also don't get the real chance of 20 squaddies following you back to your car and taking you and the car and possibly shoving you in a lake. So I'm happy enough with that. So I hope that answered that question. Another one. Your books feature incredibly well realized observations of everyday life. Again, thanks very much. When you then build into great stories, do you walk around with a notepad? No, to be honest. I've only ever walked around with a notepad once. Well, I say a notepad, my phone. And that was in The Day That Never Comes, which is my second book. There is a riot in Dublin. And I actually did go back to Dublin, and I spent a day walking around the centre of Dublin with a notepad, with my phone going, oh yeah, there's bricks there. We can use them in a riot. And basically building a riot out of things. Sorry, I say that. There was also the story when I was in New York. And I do remember doing that. The weirdest thing about that was me and my wife standing in the middle of a big park in the centre of New York near the Lego store on Manhattan. And it's one of the most secure areas in the world because it's Manhattan for obvious reasons. But I remember standing there, my wife just going, come here, and said, well, where do you reckon you could put a sniper around here? Like, oh. And we're like sort of having a very quiet conversation because it's the kind of stuff that would get misconstrued very easily. But yeah, no, I don't, I sort of, to be honest, I don't leave the house. And that was even before the lockdown. So yeah, I mean, that stuff, yeah, I don't particularly, I kind of get these things like it's come to you over time. Sorry, Caroline. Hello, Alex and Caimh. Hello, Caroline. So Samantha, who would play Bunny on screen? People ask me this a lot. Thank you very much for the question. A lot of people say he's Brendan Gleeson. I would think there's him, there's Colm Meaney. To be honest with Ireland, there are so many great actors. I mean, you shake a tree and three of the feckers fall out of it. Ireland is blessed with so many great actors. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I would like it to be an Irish actor pretty strongly because it feels like, why would you not when we have so many great actors have an Irish guy play them? But yeah, as I say, Brendan Gleeson, to be honest, the Gleeson family have more great actors than some countries have managed. So I think any of them would be good. There's Donal and there's Brian Gleeson, and Brian Gleeson actually looks like a younger version of his father. So either of those would be great. But as I said, I've had discussions with TV people, and not to spoil it for any non-writers in, but let's be clear, I have no say in that whatsoever. I think if anyone who's been at Harrogate, I remember a couple of years ago, there's been a few different things with big name authors, and Patterson, was it last year? Patterson did Harrogate.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah, and he did, and he was talking about sitting there watching the Hollywood adaptation of one of his books, and his wife was beside him, and somebody walked on screen. He went, "Who's that?" And then his wife went, "From what they've said, I think they've just said it's the main character's sister." He went, and apparently Patterson went, "I didn't know he had a sister." So my point is, as an author, you do not get much control over these things. So but yeah, so kind of those are the ones people do think. Next question from Samantha. Hurling features a lot in the Dublin trilogy. Did you play much yourself? Confession time, Samantha. No, never. I think they maybe tried to do it once in PE, and I had no idea what I was doing. To my great shame, I'm not 100% on all the rules. And let's be honest, though, if you've seen hurling, most of the people involved are also not 100% on most of the rules. It's basically a fight. It's a spectacular fight. A friend of mine, when I was in college, played for Dublin and as well as football, so I got much more into it then. But no, I think it's just, it's part of my culture, and I do enjoy it. I like watching it. It's an amazing sport to watch, but I've never played. It's hard to look at me. You'd find this hard to believe, but shockingly, I'm not the athlete I appear. I've tried every sport, and I am universally terrible at all of them. Which is like, and I mean all of axe throwing. I had to go. I thought axe throwing. I thought this must be the one. Nope, and that was the last one I could think of. So no, much as I love watching it, never done it. And next question then is what has been your most memorable moment as an author so far? Ooh, that's a good question. What has been my most memorable moment? I think I got recognised bizarrely in a pub. I was back in Dublin meeting my old mates for a pint. When I go back to Dublin, me and the same lads who I was in a band with go for a pint every time. And I don't get recognised despite the fact I'm pretty recognisable. But I was in a bar in Dublin and someone come up and went, "Oh, you're Caimh McDonnell." Yeah, oh, I've read your books. Oh, brilliant. And I happened to be there with all my oldest mates. And they all went, "Ooh." And it was literally like 2 minutes. And just after about 2 minutes, I had to confess up and went, "I'll be honest, lads, that never happened. That's never happened before." But that genuinely, actually, and a serious thing in my books, there's a character called Smithy, who is a dwarf. And thing is, when I wrote him, I was always very nervous because he's basically unashamedly, he is my fan letter to Peter Dinklage. I literally, people say, was Bunny Brendan Gleeson? He didn't start that way, but a lot of people said it. I'll be honest, Smithy was always Peter Dinklage, who's from Game of Thrones and The Station Master and so many other things. And I wrote very much with him in mind. When I was coming to the character, it just seemed instantly interesting. And I'd seen him talk about his experience as being a working actor and getting no work for years because he wouldn't do the stuff that they insisted he do, like being leprechauns and stuff like that. And I just thought that was really interesting for a character to have that moral standard to go, no, I'm not going to be judged by this crappy standard you've set. I'm an actor. I'm not just some bloke who happens to be 4'6" or whatever he is. So I loved the idea of Smithy, and I wanted to make him a badass, and he's one of my favorite characters. But it was very nervous doing it because you want people, with these things, you want it to go the right way. You want people to understand the intent, and you want somebody from that group, if you're writing that group, to feel like that was a good representation. So honestly, probably the best thing that happened was a guy who was actually the head of the charity in Britain, I can't remember the name of it now, that deals with smaller people's issues. He wrote to me and said, "We'll just say that's my favorite ever character I've read who has dwarfism." And genuinely, that was massive for me because I just felt, all right, good. I didn't do something horrible. I got it right. I've made a real human being there. So honestly, that's probably the coolest thing. Because everything else comes and goes. But you think if you think that the work itself is actually doing a good job in representing people, then that's all you can ask for. So I guess that's probably the best moment, genuinely, I think I probably had. The next question. So I'll just keep going on these, shall I? I don't want to take over.
I was thinking about the sports side of things and hurling and stuff. So that in the Angels one, there was the little sidekick guy that was always on the bench,
yes.
And then he evolved to be the receptionist.
Yeah.
In your latest.
Yeah, no, he's because he's, to be honest, he's based on me as a kid. He's the guy who's just terrible at sport. He ends up being the assistant manager of the hurling team, and he's sort of like a little kid, but he's also like Al Capone as a child, and he's quite this full-on little character. And he's actually one of those characters that people always ask, and they're always like, "Can he come back?" And you're like, "Well, he was a kid in 1999. I'm not sure what we can't keep writing books with him in it." But he's one that I've really enjoyed writing because it was one of these scenes that came out of something else. But Bunny interacting with this hurling team he set up, which is the worst kids hurling team in Dublin, is the whole idea. And all these kids are terrible, and Bunny doesn't know how to coach them. And they're just, those scenes are some of my favorites because it's just him losing the plot, having no idea what he's doing, and then trying to give these kids sort of speeches. But at the same time, he's also using it as his own little youth club to keep an eye on these kids, because he's very big into kind of being part of the community and taking care of the kids and making sure they stay away from drugs and all that. So yeah, that became a massive part of it, just because really it was great because it became a way of having him interact with kids and sort of be part of the community, and it really made him come to life as a character for me. And that was how sport wasn't part of it. It was just it was just a way of getting it done, really. But he's a very popular character. People do constantly quote him. We asked fans recently what was their favorite line, and pretty much almost everybody picked a line where the kid says about, the problem is he just keeps using it as a line over and over again. He's got no understanding of the fundamentals of the game, which doesn't make much sense. If you've not read the book, it doesn't make much sense. But it's basically this little kid just going around, and he's basically. I remember one of the things that sums it up. One of the lines I do remember is when he's trying to get rid of him, Bunny, because he has to talk to somebody. He goes, "Decky, can you go down and have a chat with our goalkeeper and rev him up?" He's like, "What do you want me to say to him?" He's like, "Well, he's asleep, so I'm pretty sure there's no wrong answer to that question." So I think that sort of sums up the kind of vibe of it. and Decky became very popular because of that. Yes, there's that. Shall I go on to the next question, or have you anything else? Sorry.
I've got a question about rugby and mascots. There's a question.
All right. All right. So a question about rugby. For anyone's interested, by the way, I do mention I'm a big rugby fan. I used to be the announcer at London Irish, which is in the English Premiership. There are 12 teams in the English Premiership, and frankly, over the last 5 years, we've been consistently the 13th, which means we've been relegated twice. So I was the announcer there until quite recently, and so I'm sort of quite obsessed with rugby. People actually regularly ask me why rugby doesn't feature in the books more. I don't really know. I think it's just because the character of Bunny just came from a place where he would be a hurling fan. So I there's the odd mention of rugby, but also you have to think hurling's already hard enough for the Americans to understand. If I bung in rugby as well, that will really loosen people. That's me at rugby.
I'm being asked to mention the Cork accent.
Oh yes, Bunny is strongly from Cork, which is it's a peculiar accent, Cork, because its accents are so like one of the problems we had when we were trying to get a narrator for the book is we put it out for auditions. We got a lot of Americans, and they were coming back going, "I can do both Irish accents," and I was like, "Sorry, both? What are both Irish accents like? Man and woman?" It's like, "Oh, okay, so there's just one." Because Cork is a unique place where it has two at least very distinct accents. It's a city of, for any English people, I don't even know what would be the same size as it. It's maybe the size of Derby, I guess. And I'm probably going to get hate mail from Cork or Derby about this. But yeah, it's quite a small thing, but it's got a very strong accent, and it's got, I'll put this diplomatically, it's got a very strong opinion of itself. Cork calls itself the real capital, without any hint of irony. And yes, so the Cork accent's quite unique, and it's actually, to be honest, Bunny's accent is based on somebody I used to know from rugby. He was actually, the character was not called Mcgary till 2 weeks beforehand. He was also not a big fella, he was quite a short fella. And then myself, I had a panic because I went, this is too close to the guy it's based on. He's going to realise someone's going to read this and he's going to find out about it. And he's a scary guy in the sense that he'll give you quite the bollocking. So he ended up getting much taller, and McGary was the name I came up with, which apparently does exist, weirdly. I thought I'd made it up. Apparently there are people with that second name. But yes, Cork is a very interesting and vibrant city, and I recommend everyone visits it at least once, and only.
You've based books in Ireland and the US. Where else do you think you'd base it, considering that you've taken Bunny in other places?
Yeah, that's good. Great question. People are always asking me that. And I've had people send me letters from Canada asking me, or emails from Canada going, "Why you not come to Canada?" It's like, well, it's not happened yet. I mean, if I can think of a reason. I don't know. I mean, the latest one that I've just finished is, the first two were set in New York. This latest one is set in Las Vegas. Because it's a fun place to set. It's between Las Vegas and a prison. To be fair, Bunny spends most of the time in the prison, not to give too many spoilers away. But locations like that are just, if you find somewhere that there's an interesting angle to. So for example, like I've done The Stranger Times is very much based in Manchester, where I live now, and I've lived here for about 7 or 8 years. And part of the logic of that was I wanted to do something here because I thought, like, I should be able to write in the accent of the place I'm living. I know this place well. I should use that. I shouldn't just use Dublin or America. But in future, I don't know. I guess it depends where the mood takes me. Because people have thought I've moved. Bunny went to America for like some sort of marketing reason or something like that. Like, oh, it's very clever for the American market. That I really don't plan that far ahead. I don't do anything like that. It's like I just write whatever the hell I fancy. To be honest with you, there really is no plan involved. But yeah, so I don't know in the future, I guess, is the answer. Yeah. Weirdly, I don't see Bunny coming to I'll have lots of books based in England because that's the Strange Times is. I probably don't see Bunny coming here though. Don't know why.
Understandably, because that'd be against the brand, I think.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think it's just America's more. The thing is with America, with the best way of saying it, I love America genuinely, but the thing is, in America, the good stuff's the best in the world, and the bad stuff is the worst in the world / president. So it's an amazingly vibrant place, and it's a great place to write crime, because especially if you write like I do, where there's always a sort of odd, funny slant in it. Because as we all know, in America, not only can anything happen, it probably already has. Like, you can't come up with a story. You couldn't make up a story, my friend, involving an alligator that has not already happened. I defy you to come up with a 4-line alligator headline. You stick it in Google, it will have happened in Florida probably within the last year.
Yeah, you wrote a story about an alligator, didn't you? I believe something to do with trains.
I don't. Did I? It may well be.
Short story, something to do with alligators and brains or something. I think.
There may well have, but I can't recall it. I know I've used the idea, but I've never actually had an alligator. The reason I've never had alligators is because Carl Hyacin is a big hero of mine, and he's had a lot of them, and it feels like that's very much like his thing. It's like, it's like the signature. You can't really use another author's signature, and that kind of feels like stepping on his territory.
Yeah.
So yeah, shall I check? Do you want me to go back to these questions, or shall we?
Absolutely. If there's
all right.
In there, yeah.
There's a couple more, so let's just, because the one is a very powerful and moving short story. How long did it take you to write? Oh, thank you very much. For anyone who doesn't know it, there's a short story. I kind of do a thing where if you go to my website, whitehairedirishman.com, there's a collection of short stories you can get for free for the Kindle just by joining the newsletter, or else you can get them on paperback on the thing, on Amazon and other places. The one is actually, I don't even know when I wrote it. It's basically an idea of somebody at a speed dating event coming up to somebody else just saying, "You're the one," and he's basically decided that it's his last chance at romance, and he sort of, right, I'm going to go out and do this. And they have all this sort of logic about how this might work and how it's 1,000,000 to 1 chance so it might work. So, but thank you very much. I'm delighted you enjoyed it. It didn't take long. I think I think it was probably a couple of days. I love short stories because you can take one simple idea, write as much as that idea needs, and stop. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to develop it to go somewhere else. The short story is basically, it's in and it's out. There's no messing about. It's like it's like robbing a bank as opposed to writing a novel, which is very much like setting up your ISA, investing it wisely, and over the next 7 to 10 years, it'll come to fruition. The short story is basically, give me the money and I'm gone. And I love that. So I'm glad that's just one of I do like short stories. It's just one simple concept. So I think it was pretty brief, to be honest. But thank you very much. I'm delighted you enjoyed it. I'll just go to the next one. I love the balance between story and laughter in your books. Thank you. There's a big laugh every few pages. Do you ever have to take out a few funnies to achieve that balance? Well, thank you for the question. To be honest, it's sort of a rhythm thing that happens on its own. One of the best note I ever got was my editor, Scott Pack, who I mentioned earlier, on my first book. At the end of it, the finale of A Man with Those Faces, he actually said, this couple of chapters, is this joke, this joke, this joke, this joke. They're all good jokes, or good funny lines, rather than jokes, really. But they're all good lines. He went, take them all out. So I really said, because you've built us up to a finale, we care about the people involved. And his point was, now is not the time for this to be funny. Now is the time for us, because we're worried about these people. We want to see them get through it. And he was absolutely right. And I think what that was is, because that was my first book, being funny is, my go-to stick. It has been since I was 6. So I reflexively do it. And he made the point about you should be able to take it out when you need to. And I think Angels on the Moonlight, which you read, Alex, I think that was my book where I was kind of got more confident about when it's appropriate to be funny, that's fine. But there's a lot of chapters in there where there is no funny bit, and there shouldn't be, because it deals with some dark matter. And I think that was the important thing. I kind of grew as a writer when I realized how I could do that, I guess.
Yeah. Talking about chapters, in the final game, you've named each one.
Yeah, it's weird because I kind of like that in some books. But to be honest, I sort of have this thing where when I'm writing stuff, more often than not, I've named them. And it might just be something like, this is the one where this happens, because just to try and remember, because I have it all up on a board on the wall, on a pin board. And then sometimes they have funny names, and then sometimes they don't. And usually what happens is, I usually have the names at a certain point in the process when I'm editing or something. They annoy me and I just take them all out. And that was one. I think that might be the first one actually where I actually left the names in. Maybe there's been another one, but yeah, I guess just that was the one where for the first time ever the names didn't still. I still found them reasonably amusing after like 4 months, where it's usually by the end of 4 months you're sick of the sight of them. But yeah, I've seen it in some books. I have seen some books where they give away what happens in the chapter, and that seems unforgivable, which I hope I haven't done. But yeah, it feels like a fun thing.
I think the advantages of tea was that only time you use it twice.
Yes.
What do you like about observing people, and do you drink tea while doing it?
No, again, this is I've written in that book. There's a lot of jokes. There's actually in that book there's 2 whole chapters about tea and the use of tea and how you can use it when you're drinking tea to look at people, what it says about people. There's a big thing in Disaster Inc. The opening is Bunny trying to get a decent cup of tea in America. To be honest with you, I never drink tea or coffee. I don't. People, I feel like such a con when people catch me out on this, but I go, oh, I don't drink tea. People also, I genuinely get emails people asking for recommendations of whiskey, and I go, to be honest, I don't drink whiskey either. Like I drink quite a lot of rum, like a bit of rum, but yeah, I don't. I guess people do say about the observing people stuff, and I don't know. I guess I don't find something I sort of actively do. I think it's just something you kind of in you. Maybe as a stand-up comedian, it was something you develop where you're getting these senses. The only time I do remember actually consciously observing people was I was in the Blanchetown shopping centre, which is near where I'm from in Dublin. My mother was off shopping. I brought her up, and I was sitting there waiting for her to come back. And I did actually once, as like for half an hour as an exercise, when people were walking by me, I just tried to write a 1-line description of all of them. Like I just tried to pick somebody who went, well, what does he look like? And then tried to do that. And then somebody else. And it was a fun exercise, but I must admit, I've never done it again because I'll be honest, I don't sit around shopping supermarkets that much. Even before the current climate, I didn't sit around shopping centres that much. And I'm a lot less likely to do it now, because if you're doing that now, that's just nice mask, no mask, nice mask. But yeah, I don't. It's not something you sort of. I guess it's just something that's there. Hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you for a great hour. We've only got a few more minutes, so if anyone's got any questions.
Okay. Samantha's just saying thank you. Thank you very much, Samantha. It's been lovely. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much. I don't know what to say about if we're filling in. If you like, I'll just do some shameless self-promotion. Will that kill a bit of time?
Yeah. If you've got something to tell us, yeah, great.
Well, just so if anyone is interested, I have there's a standalone called Welcome to Nowhere, which is coming out August the 18th. It's not up for pre-order yet, but it will be pretty soon. Which is actually Smithy, who I mentioned earlier, the character based on Peter Dinklage. Him and Dillard, 2 characters that I kind of really enjoyed for the American book. I gave them their own book, which actually someone asked about this, and I'll be honest, it's kind of like, it's sort of my COVID book in a weird way, because I started writing it already. We were supposed to, myself and my wife were supposed to go to Mexico for 2 weeks on a big holiday. It was like our big getaway for the last year. It was our sort of celebration of all the work we had to do for last year. And then, I don't know if you've seen the news, stuff happened, and we couldn't go to Mexico, because you don't want to go to Mexico right now, unfortunately. So I basically, instead of going to Mexico, I was at home and I was like, oh, I might as well keep going in the book. And then I was like, oh, there's a lot, as we all know, a lot of writers have said, there's a lot, for anybody, there's a lot of stress at the minute. There's a lot of, So I just went, do you know what? I'm just going to write this, and I'm going to make whatever I fancy, the maddest idea I come up with. That's what I'm going with. I'm not going to second guess myself. I'm just going to go whoosh. We're going to go off on a tangent, see what happens, and just keep going. And I must admit, because of that, I love the book. It's like it ends up Welcome to Nowhere. They end up the 2 characters after the sort of setup. It's based on a short story I had originally, and then I always wanted to write more of it. And it went somewhere I did not expect, where they end up in a place called Nowhere in the middle of the desert. They don't even know where they are. They've basically been kidnapped by this lunatic. They're in this game where I came up with these idea that was these rich guys who are trying to collect unique items from around the world that kind of define human history, like the real human history. So to give you an example, they're the people that have the brain of JFK. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the brain of JFK has disappeared back in the 60s, I think, over 70s, I think it was. And they're the people who have it. They collected all these weird and wonderful things.
Yeah.
They have this collection. One of them goes mad. So Smithy and Diller end up in this town called Nowhere. They get hijacked to there. And this guy thinks he's building an army where he's got the worst of the worst people from around the world. It's like, so it sort of ends up in this kind of weird Mad Max fever dream. There's a giant fighting robot, there's an orangutan, and there's the brain of JFK. And it's kind of one of those things where I think some fans will love it. You know, some I'd imagine to go, this is a bit much, fair enough. But it was just a lot of fun. And people ask me how you keep writing when there's all this sort of stress going on. And what I did was I just went mental in the best way possible. I thought, I'm just going to go for the maddest idea. And Welcome to Nowhere ended up being the result. And I'm genuinely, jinx touch wood, we'll see what people say, but I really like the book. I think it's a lot of fun. And then after that, I've just finished the Mcgary Stateside Book 3, The Quiet Man, which is, I would say, the most complicated book I've ever written, in the sense there's a lot going on. The Sisters of the Saint are in it. There's a lot more Sisters of the Saint now. We kind of meet more of that team. There's a lot of different stuff happening. It's kind of Ocean's 11 meets The Shawshank Redemption. Bunny's in a prison, and the sisters have to pull off a massive heist. It all makes sense hopefully in the grand scheme of things. But I think again that was probably, if you're going to write in the middle of a pandemic, you might as well go full on for the mad ideas. And I think I've done that recently, and I've really enjoyed it.
Well, I've got to eat some more Bunny because I loved it. So yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay.
And thanks very much for having me. This has been an absolute delight.
No problem at all. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
All right. Cheers, folks. Thank you very much.
Bye.
See you all soon.